About 7 months ago, I did a video on the ROG Ally and the open box buying experience that I had personally, and if you watch that video, you'll know that this is the third one because I had an issue with the SD card reader on the first one, which was unfortunately pretty common with these things, and then I had an issue with the B button being jammed on the second one. This third one, however, has been my daily driver as a portable gaming console, well, since that video came out. And today I've come up with 3 things that I absolutely love about it as positives, and 3 negatives. And especially now that the ROG Ally X is out, I think this would be a perfect time to consider whether you should get this, the X, or a Steam Deck. So let's dive in. Now, because the internet is full of negativity and I like to try to be positive, we're gonna start with the positives, and the first one on the list is kind of obvious, but definitely worth mentioning: the portability. I mean, I was already sold on the whole portable gaming thing when the Switch came out, but the fact that now you can have AAA titles and take them on the go is freaking awesome. And a personal benefit for me is the fact that I love playing Halo Infinite and I love playing it with my friends, but well, 343 didn't give us split screen, so I can't just take a controller over to my buddy's house and play it on the same console as him. Instead, I can take the ROG Ally over and he can play on his Xbox, and we can do a basically old school LAN party between my ROG Ally and his console. It is freaking awesome. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because, like I said, portability is kind of obvious, but the fact that you can have a AAA title playing experience on the go is freaking awesome. The second positive for me is the controller layout. Now, I'm sure for some people it might not be a benefit because there are PlayStation fans out there, but I love this controller layout. It's an Xbox style with the offset thumbsticks, and for me that's just always been more comfortable. I absolutely love it. The face buttons are Xbox formatted, so letters instead of shapes, and they're actually pretty comfortable, especially since these aren't mashed in like the one that I had before. And then the triggers are pretty comfortable. The textures for the triggers are nice, so if you're playing a racing game, your fingers aren't going to slide off very easily. And that texture is carried up to the lower portion of the bumpers, which are nice and clicky. I do like the bumpers. And then the resistance on the thumbsticks is interesting. It's not crazy loose, but it is looser than something you'd find on, say, a traditional Xbox controller. I'd put it somewhere between maybe a third-party controller and I guess a main first-party controller. It's weird. The best way I can describe it is that it's not so loose that you can just throw the thumbsticks around super easily, but it's not so tight that you have to put a decent amount of effort into moving them. It's somewhere in between. If you have a chance to actually try them, go to a store and try them. It's hard to describe. And then you have, of course, the D-pad, which is probably my only complaint with the controller layout because, well, the D-pad is not great. But they did improve that on the ROG Ally X, so maybe that's something worth thinking about if you're debating between this and the X. But because this thing's laid out just like a regular Xbox controller, when you see it in game, it just shows up like an Xbox controller. So if you're used to that, there's really no learning curve to the controls. It's just those controls spaced out slightly because you got a screen in the middle. And the only part of the controller layout that I never really used were the back buttons. Don't get me wrong, I think that there are some pretty cool programmable options, but I've just never really been the kind of guy to use a controller with the back buttons. In fact, I have an Xbox Elite controller and I don't use the back buttons on it because, well, I'm just so used to the regular layout without those buttons. So it's cool to have. I wish they were smaller. Fortunately, you can buy mods to make these much smaller, and I might do that later on, but that's the only part that I'm not a big fan of, but the rest of the controller layout is fantastic. But now moving to the last positive, and this is definitely the #1 positive for me, it's the performance. This thing is a freaking monster when it comes to performance. Like, the range of titles you can play on this thing because of what the performance allows for is freaking awesome. I've played games as simple as Halo CE or Fallout New Vegas, all the way up to games as crazy graphically intense as Forza Horizon 5 or Helldivers 2. It's so freaking cool. It's one of the reasons why I sold my Xbox Series X and my PS5, because yeah, those games are really good to play on those new consoles because you can play them on a 4K TV and they look really cool, but there's a benefit to the portability, especially when you can still get 40, 60, 80, all the way up to 120 FPS on a console, technically a gaming PC, like this little guy here. And yeah, I keep calling it a console. I'll dive into that a little more in the negatives because it feels like a gaming console. It feels like what a portable gaming console should be, and that's a good thing. but it is still a gaming PC. We'll talk about that in a bit, but for now let's stick to performance. Because the ROG Ally has different performance modes, you can kind of optimize which one works best for different games. Like if I'm playing the Master Chief Collection, I just play on performance mode because it really doesn't take the full grunt of this thing to actually put 120 frames on the screen of Halo CE or Halo 2. But if I'm playing something like Helldivers, I'll play on turbo mode, which gives me the full performance of the chip and will get me the best performance out of that. And if I'm playing something for a long period of time and I want to get the most out of it and I'm not really going anywhere, I'll plug it in to get a full 30 watts of performance and get the maximum you can out of this little SoC. It's pretty cool and it gives a little extra customization to those who like to tinker, but for people like me where it's just a simple pick it up and play it thing, I can just say turbo works for this and performance works for that and leave it as it is. So all these positives together definitely make a solid device. I love picking this thing up and playing it, but it's not perfect. There are things that could be improved, and well, now it's time to talk about the negatives because, yeah, these things need some improvement. Right out of the gate with the negatives, I'm sure you've probably seen this if you've watched any videos talking about this thing, the battery life. It's kind of a wide range in battery life, but it's still not great battery life. I mean, like, it was brought up enough by reviewers that the ROG Ally X has an improved battery life, and that was a big talking point for them because it improved the overall longevity of more intense games, which is where the battery life is kind of the worst on this thing. Like I said, the performance gives you a really wide range of games, so you can play basic games like Halo CE or Fallout New Vegas, and I can sit down and play those games for hours, literally hours. I've sat down and played through probably about 3/4 of Halo CE's campaign before needing to plug this thing in and actually charge it up again. But then I hop into something like Forza Horizon and I get 45 minutes of battery life. That's a pretty big difference in battery life. And honestly, I can't imagine draining a battery that fast is good for the overall health. Like, mine doesn't seem to have any issues battery health-wise. Like, all the tests showed that it was good. You didn't really have any issues with changes in battery life. I still get the same battery life now that I did when I first bought it, but I can't imagine over a long period of time that much draw followed by a charge all the way to full again is going to be good for the lifespan of this battery. But for now, it seems to be good, and if you are looking to play more intense games, maybe the ROG Ally X would be a better option for you since, well, the battery is improved. But for this thing, if you're taking it on the go, maybe stick to basic games until you're near an outlet. Just my thought. Now, the second negative that I came across was the thumbsticks. And again, this was something that was improved on with the ROG Ally X, but while the actual movement of the thumbsticks is good, kind of, like I said, in between the stiffness of a common Xbox controller and the looseness of some third-party garbage controller, the actual material that the rubberized thumbstick tops are made of, it started to feel like it was wearing out really quickly. It felt smoother than it did when I bought it. It didn't have the same grip as the day that I bought it, and I actually ended up buying thumbstick toppers, which I never do for this thing, because I felt like I was actually wearing down the original thumbsticks more than what was reasonable for continued use. Like, I didn't want to wear all the way down through them to the plastic like you did back in the day with the Xbox 360, so thumbstick toppers it is. And obviously it was enough of an issue because, well, again, they fixed it with the ROG Ally X, as well as fixing the D-pad, which I mentioned before was something that I wasn't a huge fan of. But it's just kind of weird. It feels like the controller layout was really good, but yet the thumbsticks were just a bit on the cheap side when it came to the rubberized material, so I had to actually cover them up to keep them from getting all the way worn down, which really sucks. It might have been accelerated by the fact that I was playing a lot of first-person shooters, but I mean, it's a video game controller. Of course, the interaction you're going to have with it the most is going to be on the thumbsticks. It's how you move. It's just kind of a weird thing to wear out quickly. Now, for me personally, the last and number one negative for this device is, well, the fact that it's a Windows machine. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Windows hater. I'm not a big fan of Windows, but I use it every day. I've got a work laptop that uses it. I've got a gaming PC that uses it. But because at its core, this is not technically a gaming console with custom software specifically for gaming, but instead is a Windows machine, this raises some bigger issues that I've experienced over time. Like, don't get me wrong, the positives on this are good. You have really good compatibility because it's just a Windows PC. But when it comes to actually interacting with the device using the built-in controllers, you're best off using the Armory crate. And if you have to use the Windows environment for any reason, you're stuck with either Touch, which I don't care what Windows says or what Microsoft says about making Windows touch friendly. It's just still not there, and I don't think it ever will be there because you are working with an operating system that has been around for decades using a mouse and keyboard, and you're trying to graft touch interfaces to it. It's not going to work. But anyway, if you have to interact with it, you're stuck with Touch, or you're stuck with controller to mouse, which just isn't great. So overall, the actual interaction with Windows is not great. But Windows itself has, well, Windows things. I've only had this thing blue screen once, but it blue screened due to an issue that came through in an update from a game that I had been playing that caused some memory instabilities and stuff. So yeah, it didn't just crash the game out, it blue screened the whole device. Or another instance of just Windows being Windows is, well, all of the crap that Windows comes with. Like, I don't need Office 365 for what I want to use as a gaming console. I don't need Teams. I don't need Internet Explorer or Edge or whatever. I don't need any of these things on my gaming console. I want to pick it up, power it on, and play a game. And Windows being Windows, every time this thing gets a Windows update, not an Armory Crate update or anything like that, just a regular Windows update, you are reminded that you should get a trial version or a monthly subscription to Office 365 that you then have to tell it to remind you to do again in 3 days. It is the biggest pain in the ass, and because it's Windows 11, you are forced, without a bunch of bypasses, to make or use an existing Windows account, which for Xbox users like myself isn't a big deal, but it just sucks that I can't pick this thing up, ignore any accounts specific to Windows, and just play Steam. Now, in all honesty, I'm still going to use this thing as my go-to for just portable gaming. The battery life, I can kind of get over that. It's a negative and definitely was something that was worth improving on the next generation, but if I'm playing a big game, I'll just plug this into power. The thumbsticks I fixed with thumbstick toppers, and that really doesn't bother me. These things feel fine. But every time I'm reminded of this being a Windows machine, it just pisses me off because it's just those little things that Windows does that irritate me. The ads when I go to open a program, the reminders to subscribe to something that I don't want, or just the fact that I can swipe in from the side and just get ads and news articles that I don't care about. That really irritates me and almost irrationally pisses me off, which is one of the reasons why I've considered, either for a video or as a replacement for this, maybe getting a Steam Deck instead. I still think this is the better device when it comes to performance and overall compatibility with gaming, which is a benefit of Windows. Windows has better compatibility for Windows games, but the Steam Deck being something that runs Linux, aside from the Linux community being what they are, the Steam Deck running Linux means that you are much closer to it being a console with custom software specifically made for gaming, and that's kind of cool. I think if they can improve some of the overall security issues, not the security of the device itself, but issues like anti-cheat. If they can fix those and maybe give me a bit more performance, that might be a decent product to replace this with. But for now, aside from those negatives, I think the positives outweigh it, and I love this device, even 7 months on after my original experience with the open box. So let me know what you all think in the comments. This device for me, again, it has been fantastic. Do you all have one of these? Are you debating on this or the X? Let me know in the comments down below. Or did you go with something like the Steam Deck? All that down in the comments below. Super curious to see what you all think. Aside from that, thank you so much for sitting through this video or enjoying the video. One of the two. Hopefully enjoying more than just sitting through. But either way, that's been it. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss more content like this. And I do shorts pretty regularly of just random little things I'm interested in, so you can check those out as well. Until then, thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. Make sure to be there and have a good one.